Thank you for coming out on this cold day. That's one of our 2 annual meetings where we talk about mission and ministry and our plans to move forward in faith. So welcome. We have a quorum, so we can begin. The order of the meeting will follow the agenda that is in your spending plan. Does everybody have a copy? If not, there's some extras in the back if you don't bring your copy. So to begin, first I would like to thank, there were several people who were instrumental in helping set up and provide refreshments for you. Wonderful group of people who came in to make sure you were fed physically as we feed you spiritually later in the discussion. Okay, so one of the things we like to do, this is one of our, as I said, one of the 2 important meetings we have every year about putting our faith in action. So if there's anyone who's here for the first time, I'd like you to stand up and be recognized.
Yeah, there you go.
Welcome. And please, if there's something in the proceeding that you don't understand, raise your hand and I'll try and explain it.
Or a comment that I want to make.
And please, feel free to comment. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, this is the meeting where we talk about putting our treasure in action to follow our mission and ministry. So this year, as always, we're going to review 2013 financial results. We're going to review the spending plan that council has put forward for your consideration. But this year, especially, I believe, we're being asked to look into ourselves as a congregation, look into ourselves as individuals, as members of our faith community, and talk about how we want to move forward in mission. You're going to hear an approach that council put forward that's embodied in the spending plan. We have a couple of other motions that, well, at least one other motion that came in, well, 2 motions that came in during the week that we're going to put forward that present different ideas on how we can put faith in action, how we can deliver on our mission and ministry. And we need to, as a fellowship, talk about that respectfully, talk about it cordially, but talk about it. We need to really drive to the various opinions and options that we have for moving forward. So we'll manage the discussion from up front. We'll ask people to be recognized. Okay. So, but more than just the numbers this year, and it's always more than just the numbers, but particularly this year, we have a couple of issues about how we move forward that we want to talk about. And it's a collaboration and a discovery and a discernment process together. Yes, sir.
Just a point of order, how many are actually here? We have a quorum, I know 47, but how many are actually here? Can somebody check the signage sheet?
Okay.
77 are here.
So-
There's a
Thank
few
you.
stragglers in Luther Hall too.
Yes. But as of now, so when we start call to order, saying so.
Yes. Dave, would you go? Okay. Now that we've established sort of the purpose, we've established that we have a quorum and we call to order, I'd like to ask Chris Kowarski to lead us in prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the faith-filled spirit of this congregation in this place. Thank you for the ties that connect us to one another and to those outside of our congregation in your wider world. We are particularly in need of your gifts of discernment and decision today as we face another turning point in our history here. We're struggling today to discern the best way forward, to find our mission, and to make a difference in the world. We pray to you, Lord, to make choices today and to take steps that strengthen our faith in you and that help us keep faith with others. We long to follow in the footsteps of your Son, but are unsure of how best to do so. Please help us find the way. Help us respond to your call for adventure. We pray in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, so a little bit on the order discussion. So we're going to follow through the agenda, as I said, in the spending plan. We have 2 motions that I'll put up that have already been submitted. If you would like to present a motion, the format for stating your motion is listed, if it affects the spending, is stated in there. Please raise your hand to be recognized. Okay? We're going to try and have an orderly discussion, so once you make your point, we'll let others who raise their hand either comment or discuss, speak before so we get, everybody gets a chance before we have multiple people speaking multiple times. We're going to try and follow Robert's Rules of Order, and Dave Worth is our parliamentarian, and he will guide us and me. He will wave frantically if I violate some fundamental principle of that process, and he will set us straight. So we will attempt to make it orderly. Raise your hand. I will attempt to identify and recognize everyone and give everyone a chance to speak. We will have the option to limit debate if it appears to not be making progress. But the goal is to make sure everyone is heard. Any questions about the order and how to work together in this session? Okay, great. So let's start with a review of 2013 financials. Jan Schnitzlein is going to talk about the giving side of our equation, and we unplug. But okay, go for it.
I'll just make this really quick because I know we have a lot to do. The numbers that are in the report are as of the time that the report was printed. We do have a couple more pledges. Since then, I always anticipate for people who don't pledge what the giving will be, so it's not a big issue. But it's never too late to pledge. We do have, most of the people have pledged, particularly people who don't.
Last year, 2013, what were we kind of came in under the pledge results.
We came in under the pledge results. We were for people who pledged, we were 4% under. So there were some special situations there. With this year, it's 2.5% in terms of the discounting of the pledges. We hope that doesn't have to happen. But the other thing that I just wanted to point out is that we did have 7 young adults who pledged this time. So yay, we're on for that. So that's it. Any questions?
Thank you. Eric, do you want to make any comments about the 2013 results? Generally, Ed's not here, so this is from the treasurer's report. Any things you wanted to point out or highlight from the I know you weren't. I didn't tell you that Ed wasn't going to be there.
Good morning. Very simply stated, this year was kind of a good news, bad news situation. The bad news is that our pledged income has dropped, and it's something that is a bit of a concern to us, and we'll be talking about that. The good news is that our expenses have been very low. That's partly due to some bad news. We lost staff over the year. But the bottom line is we ended the year with a pretty healthy surplus, and we'll be discussing ways of dealing with that surplus going forward. Any questions?
Thank you. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at 2014. So just in terms of pledges, Jan mentioned, pledges for 2014 are below actuals for last year. So we're starting the year with, I believe, it's a number of forecasted income of $485,000, which is down from where we were sitting last year talking about.
Do we have any insight into the reason for that? Did people move away? Did people reduce their pledges? Did people
Yes.
leave the church?
Can you repeat the question because no one's mic up here?
Okay, so the question was, I just stated that pledging is down this year. And Martin's question was, do we have insight into the factors that contributed to why pledging is down? Jan has done a significant amount of analysis on that, and I believe she can make a statement to that point. I don't think it's working, but you can try it.
It's not, that's all.
One of the situations is that our most generous givers tend to be age 60 plus. So some of it is retirement. We had a couple of people retire. We've had some people move away. So that's the biggest reason. There were definitely people who increased their pledges. It just couldn't counteract the losses that we had.
You say it was 485,000?
Yes.
Okay, so the difference...
Because that includes people who did not pledge, it includes an estimate for plate, it includes special offerings like Thanksgiving and Christmas and so on, so that's where that number comes from.
So total income is $485,000, which includes
Total offering income.
total offering income.
Okay,
Any other question in the back?
Did that contribute to members leaving as well?
Did what?
The number of members leaving the church from last year to this year? Were their membership decreasing? When you said,
We lost some people.
Okay, so the
I mean,
was the
question-
number significant compared to last year in loss of membership as far as pledges?
It was more in 2014 or 13.
We actually lost more in 2013 than we did going in. Going into 2013, we lost more people than we did going into 2014.
Okay.
But there are moves that happen, and people that are moving out are tending to be more generous givers than new members.
Right. So the trend in membership is not growing at the moment. I don't think we had a significant number of people who notified us that they were leaving the church. I think the number was 7 families.
5 or 6. even.
5 or 6, that officially said, we're moving, we're leaving. So it wasn't a huge number of folks, but any number is an issue. Several of those moved out of the area, though, so,
That was the main loss.
okay. So other income, so the total income we're working with, total projected income next year is $485,000 from offering, and then we have, I have to look at my page, we have other income of about $25,000, taking us to a total income number of $506,000 from all sources. So that's the number that council was working with as we put together our spending plan. Okay, that and the number that Eric mentioned, because of not having full staff in the office last year, we have a surplus. So the spending plan that is put forth to you is a combination of that income and trying to put that surplus to use to deliver the mission. Council put forth a spending plan with 3 priorities in mind. First and foremost, the first 2 are really around faith formation. Faith formation for our youth, faith formation for our young families to build that foundation. The second pillar was faith formation for the congregation in general, for discipleship, growing in spirit, growing in mission. And the third pillar, which I think we've taken a lot of positive steps for, was stabilizing the front office. As you know, we've struggled for the last 18 months with some issues in the front office with some staff. I think we're blessed. And I believe that having Laura on staff will really provide a solid foundation in that third pillar. Funding her for a full year is a key component of the spending plan that we put forth. The other action we've taken that's included in the spending plan is last year we had a 6-month trial for the volunteer coordinator. We believe, the council believes, that that was a successful undertaking, and in this recommendation, we have put forth the recommendation that that position be funded for the full year. That is a part-time position, but it's funded for the full year. That's a key change. And the third piece in the plan that the council has put forward is stepping out in mission and beginning the process to call an associate pastor. And we're going to have some discussion about that. But the plan that's before you is a recommendation or built on the assumption that we will make a part-time term call for an associate pastor.
Number 3. That's the one. Okay.
So those are the three issues, or those are the three major components in the spending plan. Laura Maravich for the whole year, the volunteer coordinator for the whole year, and an associate, part-time term call for an associate pastor. Everything else in the spending plan, other than a modest recommendation for increase in staff salaries, is pretty much flat. So when we move forward, there are, as you see, I want to go through some of the questions that were submitted. So we can, that hopefully will drive some discussion. There are 2 motions for some. One is a motion for the plan that council put forward. There is an alternative proposal which we'd like to discuss for another way to move forward in faith, and we will then also entertain motions from the floor. What I hope we can do is focus on the big issues and get a clear direction forward today. So that's what I'm hoping that our discussion, our debate, discernment will lead us to. Any questions about the spending plan that's been put forward at the moment? I know there's some questions we're going to go through. I'm going to try and use those to drive out. But are there any other questions?
Are you gonna go through page by page, or you just want a blanket question?
I was not intending to go through page by page. If you have a specific question, we will attempt to answer.
Okay, yeah, I was not at the forum, and I didn't email you. So just looking at the Children Youth Ministry program, under the Confirmation Youth Ministry lines, page 13. Page 13, the Children Youth Ministry, under Confirmation Ministry and Youth Ministry, as well as need-based financially, the council has proposed a decrease in funding for that. And my question is, if you're looking to hire an associate assistant pastor part-time to grow the youth ministry program, if you're taking away funding, what is that associate pastor going to use to regrow the program in terms of if they go on trips? The associate pastors, I don't believe, expected to pay their own way, so there needs to be some kind of funding if they go on trips or what have you, and I just want to know what.
So specifically, you're talking about the line item that's $2,000, is that the one?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that one, yeah, these three.
Okay. So I would say another way to look at that particular line is that we did not, in fact, decrease it. We decreased it from plan, we increased it from actuals.
Well, right, but if
So
there's no.
what was- Okay, so that was another, so you're right. Every line item in the spending plan was a trade-off. We actually looked at increasing that, but you're right. Once we get a staff person in, if we get a staff person in,
Then there might be leeway.
and we'll have to address those shortcomings as we operationalize. Myla, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think when those questions come forward, I think probably the chair of the committee should be also addressing them, so Carl, you don't have to, take all the questions.
Okay, so Corey, do you want to amplify that in any way?
You said exactly what happened. We based it on actuals. Well, no, thank you for that. And believe me, I'm not shy about speaking up with my big mouth. So, but yes, Carl is exactly right. It was based on actuals from last year. Matter of fact, a lot of it was throughout the plan.
Jan?
We also change some of the, I don't know, the bylaw or procedure or what it was, but it was something to allow for fundraising specifically for youth. So there is that possibility. Yeah,
The council passed that over a year ago.
over a year ago.
I don't remember.
But it's very restricted. It's
It is,
not-
just-
It's not fundraising, it's free will offerings.
And Joanna was the chair.
Joanna, can you speak to that?
It's not an issue. So we'll deal with that. If there's a shortfall, again, remember, this is not a budget, this is a plan. So as the year progresses, the intention is, as we learn more about what's going on, as income changes, if income goes down, we're gonna have to adjust the plan. If income goes up, we have more opportunity.
And the Children and Youth Team will have a financial plan submitted to the council to address any of these types of financial issues as they come up. But based on the spending plan itself, as Carl mentioned, that's the way we did it. And then you'll see reports from me, from our team, with specifics depending on what those activities are. Which, by the way, is still in flux and we could use help as well. So there's my recruiting pitch for the day.
Any other general questions before we just look? Charles, you have a question?
In the worship ministry budget,
What page?
page 10,
Drummer.
the Grace Alive budget line for the 2014 plan has $1,000. That is 10 services out of the 12 for the year. Why is it 1,000 versus 1,200?
Again, Charles, I believe that was a decision made based on actuals, but that's worship, right? Is that?
Yeah, that's me. It was based on actuals from last year, and actually, I do have a motion to go forward to increase that back.
Okay, so.
I'll address that.
We'll hold that motion. Sure. Okay. All right, so following the two forums that we had, several questions were submitted to the council. I've tried to capture those questions here and hopefully be able to address the answers, or address the questions. So the first one is really about the role and expectations if we were to move forward with the associate pastor. Some more specifics about roles, hours. There were various statements made during the forums about what the associate pastor's role would be, how many hours that person would work. Pastor's going to speak on that briefly, so I'll give you a second to just talk about the associate pastor when the motion comes up. But in general, council's view was we wanted to take a step forward in faith. We wanted to put forward a motion to you that says we want to move forward with an associate pastor. The exact details and that associate pastor would be, in our recommendation, focused on faith formation for youth, young families, and would be a partnership in worship for pastor. Beyond that level of specificity, we didn't go. What we're looking for is guidance from you. Is that the direction you want us to proceed? Then the process would begin. We would reach out to Synod, we would engage with the bishop and her staff, and begin the call process. During that call process, we would need to come up with very specific description of the job duties, beyond just youth and faith formation. There has been work that has been done. Jan has been doing a lot of work working with Pastor to begin to get ready for that in hopes and in anticipation of that being our direction. But we didn't want to get ahead of ourselves. So there will be a process that drives this out. Not only will there be a process, and so there are several questions about affordability and payment levels. Until we actually begin the process with Synod, we won't have the firm financial requirements. And before we actually, should the process proceed, should we move forward with Synod, should Synod in working with us agree that we're financially in a position to engage in this process, we have to come back to you when we have the candidate and the structure, and you will have to approve the deal. So there is much more work to go. And it may look somewhat different than what we've put forward now. But we're looking today for an endorsement for you, a direction from you. Is that the direction we should be going? And if so, we'll step out and begin that process and keep you informed as it evolves. So the answer is we don't have a specific, it's going to be 20 hours or 30 hours or 40 hours. We recognize that $30,000 is a small number. And what will we be able to do with that? That's what we're going to try and discover. And if we need more, we're going to have to come back and say we can't do very much for $30,000. But we don't know yet. We don't know yet. Okay. Oh, it went away.
Carl, can I backtrack just a minute about the youth budget? Several years ago, there was a special gift, if you look on page 5, the dedicated account, under youth special, there's $1,300 that has yet to be spent, even though it's been there 2 or 3 years, so there is that room to grow for youth ministry without making any budget adjustments, just $32 to make a money adjustment.
Okay, so those are dedicated accounts, yes, so that's not the operating budget, so there are funds available in
But that
dedicated
was
accounts.
meant for youth ministry.
Right, thank you. So that's an important distinction to make. When we're talking today, we're talking about the operating budget and using the operating funds. Ed has provided you a detail on page 5 of the dedicated accounts, which are designated for specific activities. We are not discussing the use of those dedicated accounts specifically today. Ministry chairs are responsible and able to leverage those dedicated accounts as appropriate to move forward in their mission and ministry for their specific team. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, so that was the first question. Any more clarification that someone would like about our vision for the associate pastor? Focus on youth ministry, focus on faith formation for young families, part-time, and the other thing we said was a term call. Lorinda.
Can you please briefly describe, or Pastor Chris or whoever, describe the other aspects of the associate pastor that Pastor Chris will rely on this person for, such as exchange of, pastoral information that is, necessarily confidential and things of that nature, please.
Guys, first of all, I just have to tell you this. It is not a 40-hour week. The Synod assumes that I'm working about 52 to 60 hours a week, and I average about 55 hours a week. So I know it's picky, but then you'll understand why we say 30 hours might be more of a part-time, or 25 hours is considered more part-time. And I don't work 120. That day hasn't happened. Okay.
I think Don answered.
Well, you know what, I appreciate all the work that our key leaders have done in helping to lay out a framework as to what would happen if we had an associate pastor. Chris and Carl and Jan and a few others. But I also made my own list of what actually goes into all of this. And when I made my list, I realized that if we're blessed to call the associate pastor part-time, they're really not going to offload a whole lot on my current plate. That was sobering. But it's okay. If we only go part-time, this pastor would be working mostly on youth formation. We're talking about working with families, fathers, working from cradle to college. We had parts of that with Linda Pullis, but never the full spectrum. We'd like to make it a full spectrum. That would be the focus. Now, here's a piece that would happen if we do this. This pastor, I know on one of the illustrations we worked on, they wouldn't preach except I'm on vacation. I can tell you, no associate pastor's gonna come if that's the deal. Even the newbies want to preach, okay? So we're going to have to work that in, that not only will they preach when I'm on vacation, which is only 4 Sundays of the year, but we would work in maybe another 4 to 6, okay? And if you want to know what time I spend on a sermon, it's anywhere between 10 and 15 hours a week, okay? Then I'm expecting them to come to worship. The only way the congregation is going to get to know this new pastor is for him or her to be in worship, leading worship. That you get to interface with all kinds of people, and so that's going to eat up some hours of time as well. Here's what the plus will be that is invisible, never shows up on any sheet, but I'm going to give you a secret here. That as pastor, I am on call 24/7. And to know that I have another pastor on our team means I can share some of the load. It doesn't seem like it would be much, but it's huge psychologically for me. Even on my day off, I'm on call. So I'm never free of the emergency phone. I'm never free of the office calling me saying, we had a death, and they're right. Laura or whoever's in that front office is absolutely right. They're supposed to call me. But that also means I never am psychologically disconnected from this place. I take that cell phone with me to the dentist, the doctor, the grocery store, and once in a while I like to just hand it off to somebody else. So that's a piece that would be very helpful. Also, every once in a while I get into a fix where I've got several crises going on all at once. Some at the hospital, some at church, somebody died, and I just can't get to everybody all at once in a timely fashion. I would expect this pastor to share that with me as well. Even as a newbie, even if it's only 25 hours a week, that's going to be part of the deal. That will be huge. That'll be huge. Now, in the foreseeable future, I'll probably be doing the weddings, the funerals, the baptisms, what else? Most of the counseling and the home visits. But once this person gets involved in the community and people start to see him or her, some folks are going to ask, could Pastor so-and-so do my wedding? I will be thrilled. A wedding takes 3 to 4 premarital sessions. It then takes putting together a bulletin. We have a wedding coordinator, Mila, who does a fabulous job. I used to do that, and it was not good. And she does it so much better. It means a rehearsal. It then means a wedding. I mean, the hours really rack up, And you don't think of it at the time. You just know it needs to get done, and you're happy to do it. But eventually, this new pastor will have the joy of doing some of these things. But the only way we're going to get that person launched is if he or she's in the front of the congregation, seeing him or her. I don't know. Do you want more information? Because I got a whole lot more.
Hang on, Mila first.
No, go ahead, Marie.
Oh, Marie, go ahead.
Marie?
Okay, quick question. If the pastor,
Stand.
thank you, okay, for reminding me. If the associate pastor is a newbie, how many hours per week is that person going to take of your time as you kind of handhold him or her?
You know what? Here's where we give back to the greater church. When I was the newbie pastor, the associate on a team, I had a wonderful senior pastor by the name of Dick Jessen, who later became bishop of Nebraska Synod. For 2 years and 8 months, that guy must have been a saint to put up with me. But he always looked at it as an investment in the future of the church. So I do too. Yes, it's going to take some time. It's part of the staff meetings that we'll have every week, which is also on my list, but that's just a given.
Yeah, I understand that is an investment in, the growth of a new pastor, but how much time do you expect that person will take, in order for you to do that? In order for us to invest for the greater good of the church?
I don't know. really depends on the person's need. I'm trying to think back, and maybe Don can remind me, I don't remember, but I bet between the 15-minute, I run into the office, I ask a question, 15 minutes, the 2-hour staff meeting, the 1-hour meeting to work on other stuff, I bet I ate up about 3 or 4 hours a week of that, or maybe 5.
Well, a broader comment is that it's so situational, as with any profession. So you may get a person for whom the mentoring is minimal, very minimal, like a second career person in their 30s. You may get someone for whom it's extensive.
Like the 26-year-old I was, yeah.
It's such a good question, Marie, because I think that's very much something to be discerned in the call and screening process, which usually can be discerned.
Lila, I think you were up, and then Brenda.
One of the things that I question in what you just were talking about, Chris, and I'm sure is a question in the minds of some of the folks on the floor, is that where does the youth ministry come into this part of that pastor's life?
That would be the, if we go with this plan, that would be the primary focus.
That would be the primary focus, okay. I just want to make sure that the folks are aware.
We haven't lost
That's
that.
the plan and the intention we've put forward.
Okay.
Yeah, Brenda, you were next.
Yeah, just a comment about that mentoring that you're going to have to do. It depends on the candidate and how much they require. But having been on staff here for 6 years, probably some of the best ideas that we came up with was when we were working together in staff meetings. And the fact that you've been flying solo here with nobody to bounce anything off or to inspire you, I think that the benefit that we're not seeing in that collaboration and her mentoring of a younger pastor is the fact that his or her enthusiasm is going to get you inspired, and the ideas will flow like they never had before, because it's really hard to do things in isolation. And I really enjoyed those staff meetings because we came up with some wild and crazy ideas, which we actually brought to fruition because of that camaraderie and that professionalism that we just bounced off each other. So that can be a really excellent byproduct of that mentoring time. Yes, I agree.
Lila, hang on. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Julie.
Julie, thank you.
Yeah, I just thought that Marie's focus was that your 55 hours a week might only come down to 50, even if we hire this person. So, anyway, that's what I interpreted. So is that going to help you, really, to go to 50 hours, even if you do have another person?
Yes, please, no. Okay, if we don't do something.
One last comment on that is that you bring in somebody with that even if they're right out of school, okay, straight out of school, they've got so much more energy than any of us in this room right now. And they've also probably have been in that mode of working to be successful in their college life, right? In their going through seminary. So they understand what it takes when they're walking in that door, that it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of getting to know and getting right into the thick of it to be successful. And I think that we're going to find those in the candidates. So I'm just excited about that. And that will help you no matter
It will.
what.
Believe it or not, I helped Pastor Justin. He wouldn't admit it at the time. But after he left the church and he retired, he said, "Oh, I really miss those days." And I was like, "Really?" It will be a huge benefit to me as your pastor to have that.
Great, thank you. All right, so we can have more discussion on this as the motion comes up, but let's move over to the questions. Basically went to the Synod guidelines, and item 7 in their guidelines specifically says that fundraising fundamentally betrays the practice of giving, which undermines discipleship. There are specific guidelines from the Synod which says fundraising is not good practice because it takes away from giving, which underlies what we're about as disciples of Christ. So that is specifically the answer to that question. Now we could as a congregation take that guidance and proceed as we will, but it's a very clear, unambiguous statement that fundraising is not consistent with our faith practice. Okay, next question. All right, this is a more technical question, and I talked to Ed about it. We do not currently have a statement in our financials that addresses this. I will follow up with the treasurer afterwards and make sure that we address it clearly. Judy, can you be more specific about what this means?
It's an IRS requirement, that if you're a nonprofit entity, you're not supposed to make a profit. So when you have a profit, it is supposed to be restricted or allocated to things going forward. And they can be very, very broad. I think the statement that's at the bottom of our financial statement as to here's our surplus for prior years going forward, and the proposal is that it go for 3-year funding for a pastor is perfect. The sentence that's missing out of this is we don't have the same thing for the daycare.
Okay, and I moved that to another slide where I talked about the other
And
question.
so we just need to have that going forward, and I think this is the first year we have a very, very clear statement as to where our surplus is going. And
So council will work with treasurer to make sure that that's clearly articulated in both parts of the spending plan. Joyce?
I just wanted to say, as a nonprofit, the organization, the business entity, is not prohibited from making a profit or a surplus. It only means that that surplus or profit cannot benefit any individual or the board members or whatever.
Right.
So that isn't actually an issue.
So I'll take a cut in my pay.
But it's important to just know that, and then it's also important to know that as long as the surplus goes back into the mission or into whatever that nonprofit is doing, we're fine, we're okay.
Great. Kathy, I think you have a question. Please stand.
Yeah, actually, it's just a clarification, because I had a question whispered in my ear in case somebody else has the same question. What do we mean by a fundraiser? Because we raise money for the church through pledges every year, it's not a fundraiser. No, a fundraiser is where you get a product or a service in exchange for the money. And
Right, yeah,
that's what
it's
we
an
don't
exchange
want.
of goods for
Yeah, goods or
service
yeah,
for
car wash or
yes.
bake sale or something.
Right. However, we are sort of comfortable doing free will offerings at the potluck dinner. I think that is consistent with the intent. Any other questions on these 2 points?
the first one's addressed in the next newsletter.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so the next couple of questions came from the adult forum. Oh, back up, Denise.
One question.
Stand up.
You were saying that like we can't get something back, so we can't like have a bake sale. But can we do like those ShopRite cards, where somebody gives $300, they get a ShopRite card that's worth $300, but then the organization gets a percentage back from those? Like,
I think that skates on
is that
the
kind of
edge.
skating along?
No, I think that's in, again, I think
Gray area.
to give you a different perspective on that, if it's not actually giving from us, it's really not consistent with what we're trying to do. I think that's the premise. It's not, is this good or bad? It's, are we actually giving of ourselves? If we're not giving of ourselves, it doesn't seem consistent with the statement.
Carl, does that mean then that, I'll give you a specific example, Somerset Patriots Ballpark, the concessions are always hosted by people looking to raise funds. So we are giving our time behind the counter and we get a cut of the profits. Is that fundraising? And my second point, which I'm going to be controversial because that's who I am.
Okay, let's answer one at a time.
Fine, well that's, I mean that's,
Are we doing that?
we're not, but a bunch of other churches
Yeah, well,
are.
it doesn't, well.
But listen, there's one other thing though I'm going to bring up because it's on video and I want everyone to know that I'm thinking about this. We can pick and choose what we want to abide by with regard to Lutheran rules, right? So if the New Jersey Synod says fundraising is bad, that's fine. But I challenge us to consider all of those things we think about and that we talk about in adult forum that are way beyond what Lutheran teaching is. And we're bringing up subjects and we're talking about subjects that are beyond
Separate
it.
that into a separate point because that's.
It's fun. Look, if we're going, all I'm saying, all right.
Can I answer your first question first?
Sure.
And then address your second?
Absolutely.
So Dave, you had a point.
I don't necessarily think it's a quote fundraising, if we're going out to Patriot Stadium and volunteering our time and in a sense, we're getting money that comes back to the church, because we're giving our time, and it's being traded for money. The problem with fundraising is we're asking people outside this congregation to give money to our mission. You're selling bake sales, car sales to strangers. And the other thing is, if you think we need a fundraiser in order to get people within the congregation to give to our mission, then we have another kind of issue we have to deal with.
And I agree. I meant outside of the congregation, bringing money in.
So clearly, one of the takeaways, and perhaps we'll address this with council, is we need to get some guidance. Because apparently, I can see from your faces that people are sort of mixed on this. Now, the second point you raised, which is a different point, which is that the discussion in Faith Talks is moving away from Lutheran theology. That is an opinion that you've stated. I don't personally, this is now my personal statement, agree with that, because I believe as Lutherans, we are called to explore, investigate, challenge, question as part of our faith journey.
I agree.
So I'm not sure that we're drifting from Lutheran theology. There are ideas that are presented that Martin Luther probably never personally expressed. But I know that is actually, I believe that discernment and that discussion and that struggle helps us in our own faith journey. Helps me in my personal faith journey.
I agree. All I'm saying is if we're going to be open-minded about talking about questioning the virgin birth and the physical resurrection of Christ and what have you, why aren't we allowed to talk about in an earnest way this thing about fundraising?
Okay, so...
That's all I'm saying. And matter of fact, we don't even need, this is a budget discussion or a spending plan discussion. We can shelve it.
I think the idea is council will take that as an action item to get more clarity around it. And if you would like to spearhead the thrust to change Satan's opinion, I'll be there pushing.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So anyway, the next group of questions, and I'm cognizant of the time, but I think the debate is helping us move forward. Excuse me, discussion. There were several things in terms of, the session that we had the first Sunday was more specific to explaining our spending plan, expanding our attentions. What we attempted to do with the session, for those of you who didn't come, on the second Sunday was to say, what if? What if we did this? What if we considered that? What if we cut benevolence? What if we, I don't know, whatever. There were a lot of ideas presented. So the next set of questions were some clarifying questions about some of the options that were presented. For those of you who weren't there, we're going to move forward to answer the questions, but if you didn't actually see the presentation, some of the questions and answers may not make sense. So if it doesn't make sense, we can handle that offline, I suggest, because it's only tangentially relevant to the mission, the presentation for today. So Jen, you just want to address the next couple of questions?
Okay, the point was about whether Synod recommends, what point does Synod recommend to pastors? And it's not Synod that recommends it, we were just showing what the ELCA is experiencing in terms of average attendance by number of pastors. And for one pastor, about the max is around 210, 215, something like that. So we're really pretty pushing at that edge. For two pastors, the experience is generally between 50 and 500, so that's a huge range. So it was just kind of explaining what is, it's not a specific recommendation, but the almost part was that we're almost at that break point where very few congregations have one pastor with an average attendance larger, right?
Yeah, does that number 210 reflect worship attendance?
Yes, average worship attendance,
What's
yes.
ours? Our average of worship attendance right now for the last 7 years is about 215. Prior to
No.
that,
It's going down. Every year's gone down a little bit. Last year was 211. This year, we just did 2013. We're getting ready to submit our report to the church.
Yeah.
197.
Yeah. This was the years 2006 to 2012.
Yeah.
In the June 2013 annual meeting.
So we're on the cusp. Yeah. You know what, actually, right now, we are staffed for no growth. And if we want to grow, we need to get staffed up so we can do that.
So that's, and like 76% of congregations, ELCA congregations are declining. 10 to 15 are growing, and the rest are in the middle. So, it's quite possible that without staffing, we would continue to decline. We need to staff to grow. And that staff can look like different things. The next point about the $24,000, that was a reference to what's in your reports about what's in the capital fund currently, and it was not to use that money to pay salaries, it was to use that money to pay the mortgage. The mortgage was increased, we refinanced the mortgage in order to pay for the capital expenditures that we had not received capital giving to that point. So the point was to use the potential to use, it's not in the spending plan, but the possibility of using it to pay for the mortgage so that the other money could be used for salaries. That's consistent with what happened with the building fund. People gave to the building fund was used to pay the mortgage, then other offerings were given to pay for other expenses.
I think Pastor has addressed the next point.
Okay,
Is
good.
let's see, what is, is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, what's the next one?
Okay.
What happens in year 4, that is not determined. This is a plan to give us the time to figure that out and to work toward that. But the year 4 is not addressed.
And clearly, the purpose of the term call was to limit our risk. The plan that's put forth by council spends down the surplus to nearly zero, makes no changes to benevolence, makes no changes in any other area. And year 4, if giving remains flat or decreases, we're going to cross that bridge when we go.
Right. One of the scenarios, the one in which we could find a way to pay for a full-time associate pastor, involved taking the mission support down to 13%. That is not the current plan, but the question was what dollars was that? And based on an offering income of $485,000, changing from 17.5% to 13% is equal to $21,825 per year. So it's almost $22,000 that we would not be sending to the Senate.
Based on this year.
Based on this year's.
Anticipated.
Right, and the plans assume that offering income, that we will find a way to remain flat, that the decreases that happen through natural causes would be offset by increases. Do we need to go into this, the Jill's numbers?
Yes, there were a couple of alternative things that council looked at and we presented. There were some differences.
Because Jill's numbers were not presented at that meeting. So. Did the number of crunches taken into account the generous donors will be retiring and moving? Yes, that is a concern. That's why in the plans that were presented, the most that was put in there in terms of increased giving was $8,000 a year, which is 1.6%. So it was considered that we will have to work hard to offset those retirements and people moving. That I want to make it clear that the plan that is being presented is not for a full-time pastor. It was for a part-time, what?
Full-time pastor.
Still crazy, it's still crazy.
Sorry, associate pastor, not for a full-time associate. What's in the plan is for a part-time pastor. What was discussed at the forum last week is that, just to put some numbers to different scenarios to say that we do have options.
Okay, before you go, Chris, just hang on. Okay, so now what I'd like, before we debate and before we discuss, I'm going to show 2 slides which have 2 motions that articulate very different, not very different, 2 different directions to address faith formation. After I show you the 2 slides, I'm going to come back and we'll actually, Jeff, you should actually make the motion and have it seconded. And then we'll have discussion on the motion that Jeff put forward, and then the council has put forward a motion. No, actually, the executive committee put forth a motion based on the discussion at the Faith Forum last week, which is another path forward. And between these 2 motions, we're hoping that we can drive out your thoughts on our intentional path forward. So let me just show you the 2 motions, and then we'll actually make the motions. And so one One is a path forward consistent with our intention to support faith formation for youth, young families, but rather than and I'll let Jeff actually speak to it, but I'm just summarizing, rather than calling an associate pastor, it's to call a lay professional with the title of faith formation director, and there is some support for that in the industry, in the church industry. And it's also a recommendation that we recognize that the money in the current plan needs to be increased. So that's one. The second motion is from the executive committee, which actually just instantiates what was embodied in the spending plan so that it's clear that we move forward with a part-time term call for an associate pastor. So there's two motions that we're about to discuss. We'll actually make the motions and move forward. Dan.
First of all, the motion is on the floor, I believe, from the agenda that we adopt the proposed spending plan. We need to vote on that first, but I would like to amend the spending plan. The line that says associate pastor should be changed to staffing. Vote on the spending plan and then go into these two motions, because if you don't, at noon, everybody's going to be walking out of this room, you won't have a quorum, and you won't have a budget line that is set, and you will be handcuffed for the next 30 days until you can call another meeting.
Okay, so Dan's recommendation, actually I did it in a different order, but okay, so Dan has made a motion. These motions haven't been made yet. I was just presenting some information for you. So Dan is making the motion. Can you restate your motion, please? Stand up.
Sure.
And Cindy, make sure you get the motion.
That we change line, whatever it is. In the spending plan, page 11.
And page 8. Page 8 and page 11.
Okay. Change the line that says associate pastor to staffing. Additional staffing.
Additional staff.
Yes. And then vote on the spending plan.
Okay, so we have a motion to reword the language in the spending plan from associate pastor to staffing.
Additional staffing.
Additional staffing. All right, is there a second for this motion?
I second.
Okay, so there's a second. Alex, I just saw Alex first.
Okay.
Okay, so, and then I'll get the second part because it was a two-part motion. So, all in favor of changing the wording in the spending plan?
Discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Dave, you're still-
Parliamentarian.
Jeff.
The amount that's shown in there that would be for staffing is $30,000 at the moment. Question is, if the motion that I'm going to come up with is a different amount, you know, if we vote on the $30,000, what is that?
We're gonna make another motion.
We're just voting on wording right now.
Voting on the name, I have no problems with that. Just if we can amend, if the second motion then can amend what we do.
Your motion is out of order.
No, so your 50,000 motion is not.
No, I'm just asking a point of order of how that would be handled.
What I'm trying to point out to Jeff is, before you get to your motion, you're gonna have to revise it because you don't have spending, you don't have the funding, $20,000 difference in there.
Right.
So we couldn't adopt your motion as it's stated. You'd have to, so the 20,000 difference you're referring to has to be.
I can speak to it, Carl.
We'll just get to it.
Okay. I don't want to.
One second. Okay, so Jeff has a question of what happens next. That's part of the discussion. Okay, other discussion.
I can answer that question.
Okay, Dan.
Okay. If we vote on the spending plan, even though the number that's in there is 30,000 or whatever, after the spending plan is adopted, if in the course of discussing a recommendation on staffing, we find that we need to amend that amount, that's fine. The purpose of my motion is to call the question on the spending plan so that we have a quorum to vote financial power to the congregation and the council to continue for next month, because it's going to take 30 days to get another meeting in here.
I actually had a plan for that.
Okay, but that's why we need to vote on the spending plan now, first we have to vote on the wording of it, then the spending plan, and then get into the second meeting, the second motion. And I'll put the motion back on the floor for the associate pastor if you want, but we need to vote on the spending plans first.
All right, right, so there's, right now, we're not even voting on the spending plan, we're talking about the wording change. And the only thing we're about to vote on is changing the wording in the spending plan from associate pastor to additional staff. Everybody's clear, that's all we're voting on at the moment.
And that's on 2 pages, Carl.
Two pages.
On 8 and 11. And 11.
Okay, so all in favor of the motion put forth, which was seconded, to change the wording in the spending plan? All right, hold your hands up. 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 1, 2, 3, we're over half.
Yep. Yeah, we got it.
Okay, 40, but keep your hands up, 44, 45, 46, 47, 8, 9, 50, 1, 2, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 1, 2, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 68. 91. So 91, 68 is more than half of 91, but I don't, okay, I still need to vote. Opposed. Opposed. 1. Opposed. 1. Anybody? 2. Thank you. Anybody else? 2. Okay. Abstain? Well, I want to actually, and that doesn't matter, I'm going to count everybody's abstain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
6.
6. Wait, hands again. Let me try again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so that the motion to rename the wording in the spending plan carries. Now, the second part of what Dan said, he called the question of the spending plan. So you'd like to vote on the...
I didn't call the question on it.
Well,
I just said we can call the question on it. We can discuss the spending plan, but that does not include the specifics of staffing, whether it's a director of faith formation, an associate pastor, or anybody else.
Are you asking us to vote now, or you want to continue forward with the discussion? I'm trying to discern what you asked me to do.
I have not asked that question.
Okay.
Because I don't know if there are questions on the spending plan.
There's still 2 motions.
There's still some questions on the spending plan, and I have a contingency plan if we get close to running out of time. But I am cognizant of that, and
No, we don't worship.
no, but there are people who want to go. But we'll keep an eye on it. Okay, so now, we're still discussing the spending plan. I have 2 motions that we're about to move, but you'd like to discuss the spending plan first. I'll hold Jeff's motion for a moment. Myla.
I move that the spending plan be amended by adding $200 to the Grace Alive budget line on page 10 of the spending recommendations. That would be taken, that $200 would be taken out of the music and supply line and put into the Grace Alive line.
Same committee.
It's the same committee. It's just an inner, just moving funds to make sure that we cover the.
Okay. We can do that. I honestly, I'm not sure that, I don't know that we actually need to manage it at that level because the ministry chairs have some discretion in there. But we'll capture your motion. So we have a motion to move $200 from which line? Supplies.
The supplies to the.
Grace Alive.
Grace Alive.
There's a second from Jeff. Okay, so discussion on this, my discussion on this is that we should empower and allow ministry chairs some level of freedom at this level of spending, but that's just my comment.
Just to speak to it, we've gone back. before, because I knew it should have gone to 12, and that I didn't catch it, so I just want to make it
Okay, so it's a
amended.
correction from the ministry, the head of the ministry.
There's no change.
Yeah, it doesn't change the total.
Doesn't
Again,
change.
remember, we're not voting a line item spending plan here, we're voting the total. So I know there's some intent to move things around and be very positive. Dave?
Just, Lyle, I believe you should be aware that as the chair of that ministry team, you have the ability at will to move money from one line to the other, just by telling the treasurer. You don't have to vote on it. Because you're not changing the extra dollars within the ministry team, it's the same dollars. And I'm sure Eric could just change that around if you wanted to, that's not an issue. I don't think we need to vote on that.
But, well, it's called, so, there was a motion, and what, was it seconded?
Yes.
It was seconded, it was a motion and seconded, so we need to vote. Opposed. Anybody opposed? 1, 2, 3. All right.
He abstains, and then
Anybody abstain? 1, 2, 3. All right, the motion carries. Out of 91, yes. Motion carries. Thank you. But I know we're all trying to faithfully describe how to spend it, but all we're called today is really to vote on the total. And there are some major changes that, like Jeff's motion, but go
I'd
ahead.
like to call the question for a vote.
Which question?
The spending plan.
Okay, you would like to call the spending plan. That we need this question? We need a
Second.
second, okay.
Who made the motion?
Bill Volk made the motion.
Okay, yes.
And Lee second. Lee. Okay, now we had a discussion on calling the question, which is to vote, to bring the vote
I
forward.
don't think it's discussion, I think it's just a vote. You can't discuss.
We can't discuss, okay, there is no discussion on calling the question.
no discussion.
We vote on calling the question.
Point of order, clarify what this means.
Okay, so Dave, can you explain what calling the question
Calling
is?
the question means that you stop debate on that particular motion. If that motion to call the question passes, then the next action is to actually vote on the original motion. No more discussion, it's basically cutting discussion of that particular motion.
Okay, what does it mean if we vote on calling on the spending plan, but there are amendments to the spending plan that we haven't discussed or voted on? How can we have amendments to something we already passed?
You can always amend the spending plan in this meeting before we leave. It's a way, in some ways, different way to do it, that's all.
That's why I had the motions
Yeah.
first. So just so you know, Dan, what my plan is if debate is continuing, at a certain point, we'll call the question and I'll put forward a motion to offer a continuing resolution which will authorize funding, and we'll have to come back. Council will have to go, re-debate, and we'll have to come back. That is an alternative plan that I have if things don't look like we're coming to a resolution. Because we do need a spending plan. We have to be empowered and authorized to move forward.
Correct.
Yes.
You do, which is why I put the motion on the floor.
That's
The question of how we staff it is a separate question from the spending plan, and once we vote on this, I will make a nomination to authorize council to go move forward with calling an associate pastor, so we put that one back on the floor.
Okay, so to summarize, what we're being asked to do right now is to end debate and to bring the spending plan forward for up or down.
Yes, that's the motion.
Yes. Do we stop discussion? That's the vote. That's what we're voting on at the moment. Okay. On the spending plan.
Actually, you have to vote on calling the question differently.
Yes.
Yes.
That's motion.
We're just voting on that.
Right, that's where, yes. Okay, what we're voting on right now is ending debate on the spending plan and then bringing it forward to vote. That'll be two separate actions. Okay, right now we're voting on ending discussion. All in favor of ending discussion? On the spending plan. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Thirty-four, 69. Okay, opposed?
Can I just make a point that you've had 7 people leave, so you have no longer have 91, you're now
Right.
down to 84? Yeah.
Thank you, Judy.
As of when? The first, the last vote or this vote?
This vote.
Before any vote, I believe.
Before this vote.
Okay.
Okay, so we're, so now looking at opposed, we had 7, so we're at 84, right? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 on this. 7. There were 7 total. Okay, and abstain? 1, 2. That's all I see is 2 abstain. 3, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Okay, so all in favor of the spending plan as amended? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Three, 4, 7, 38.
37.
38. 39. 37, 39.
Okay, opposed? Opposed? 1, 2, opposed? 3. Opposed? 3. Abstain? 1, 2, 3. 3. Okay, so the spending plan as amended has passed. Okay, don't get up, don't rush out. We really still need to cross the bridge of intention. Wait.
Does that, was that seconded, the,
Yes, it was.
It does, I missed that, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Who seconded it?
Why doesn't it need a second, Jim?
If it's coming from the.
It was Gail anyway.
It was, oh, Gail seconded, it's always
So
second.
Gail,
But it
Gail
didn't-
Tyson seconded. No.
Do you need a motion to put the associate pastor back on the agenda? If so, I will make it.
Okay, hang on just a second. Okay, so let's make sure we've done the, did we properly?
Yes.
Yeah.
You did.
Yes, we did. Did anybody need to second that motion?
Second which motion?
That's all, yes, thank you, just trying to make sure. Okay, thank you. I don't want anybody to come back and say we made a mistake and everything is null and void. So we have to do this all over again. Okay, we now have a spending plan of 516,000.
Whatever.
Whatever the total is. Thank you. 523,434. Right, and that was what we did. Okay, now, there are some motions to discuss to move with how we move forward as staff. Let's put it, Jeff has a motion that talks about a faith formation director, and the executive committee has a motion that talks about a term call for an associate pastor. So Jeff, would you like to make your motion first? All right, and it will need, I think it'll need a second, right?
Yeah. There will have to be some wording changes here because of the wording changes made to the spending plan. But I move that the spending plan for 2014 be amended by focusing the funds allocated for additional staffing to be directed to hire a full-time director of faith formation. And this, the amount that gets set aside should cover salary and benefits. The rest is actually an explanation of responsibilities, so it's not actually part of the motion, but, so, if this gets seconded, I'd like to speak to the amendment.
Is the amount in there? Is the $50,000 amount in there?
It's not. It's only 30,000 allocation. So
But
the
he's
question is.
making- He was making a
motion
to amend.
30,000 plus benefits.
Right, so you would have to involve allocating an additional $20,000 from what's shown in the spending plan through taking the money from the surplus, the capital surplus, to pay the mortgage, to allocate money for this.
Okay, so we're being asked, and it needs to be seconded. Wait, I'm trying to summarize, Cindy, you want to read back the
Well,
motion?
I want to take that from him right now, because I can't really, so, that the spending ban be amended by subtracting the funds allocated for additional staffing, and adding $50,000 to hire a director of faith formation. This amount would cover salaries and benefits. And that's the end of, I'm not including responsibilities, am I? No. Okay, so that's the end of the motion.
You have to add full-time.
You need to state exactly what
Add
the
full-time.
Okay,
Can't come from building fund.
okay, so the additional $20,000 would come, as you said, from the surplus.
Okay.
From the surplus paying the mortgage, which would free up the funds.
That's not,
that won't work.
just for surplus.
From the surplus. Okay. All right, I need a second. You want to reread it so everybody's clear on Jeff's motion?
Okay. That the spending plan be amended by subtracting the funds allocated for a additional staff person and adding,
No, we don't have to subtract it. We're actually clarifying that the additional staff person is a director, a full-time director of faith.
yeah, and, well, we're not gonna add 50,000, we're gonna add 20,000 actually, 1,000 for a full-time director of faith formation. This amount should cover salary and benefits and will come from our reserve. Or surplus.
All right, before is there a second on that motion?
Absolutely not.
A second. We have a second from Nancy, and there were seconds from a couple of misses. Okay, so there's a second. There's 30 on the line, plus 20 minutes. Okay, discussion. Oh, wait, Jeff wanted to clarify his, and then we'll let him, then we'll have discussion. So Jeff has the floor for a second.
I think we're all here for the same reason. We care about Good Shepherd, and we want to see Good Shepherd continue to grow, continue to be a very strong place for us to express our faith, to grow in that faith, and to serve the local community as well as the worldwide community. I've done a lot of thinking about with this because I've been a member of council. We've been in a lot of discussions about this, and I'm just concerned with that trying to go for a part-time associate pastor that's on a term call is just not a very good way to approach this. I would prefer to see us redirect funds, try to bring in somebody full-time who can really work side by side with Pastor Chris, trying to, I think, when you consider somebody being able to work part-time versus full-time, it just makes more sense to try to go full-time, and I think they'd be able to do a lot more in terms of working with youth development, working with all the volunteers who are doing a great job right now trying to keep Sunday school going and other things going in terms of faith formation, that working with the adult forum, the faith talks type thing, to try to get us really growing in our faith. I'd like to see somebody who's full-time doing that. I think we can bring in somebody who is a layperson, who can spend the time doing that, who can work as part of the team here, and see that we're growing. Right now, if we were in a different situation, I think trying to go for an associate pastor would be a great idea. But considering that we've had things lowering in terms of attendance, lowering in terms of membership, lowering in terms of giving, I want to really bring in somebody who can come in and work right away and try to see that the things that we need to work on here together get turned around and get work done. I think a call process for a pastor generally takes a long time. We would have, I think we'd have more chance of bringing somebody who's a layperson in a much shorter time period to be able to get in here, running on the ground, seeing things that happen. I prefer to see us put our efforts that way. I want this church to grow, and I think that's. I think we can bring in somebody at a reasonable amount. I look at what Linda Walker had been doing at 30 hours a week, and we're talking, she was getting something about $35,000 a year. That's at 30 hours a week, that's 3/4. So we're talking about somebody who we could pay for within a 50, maybe it has to be a little bit more. But an associate pastor, even looking at the numbers that Jan had for 30 hours, is going to be about 60, 65 a year. It's not 30,000, because there's housing allowances, there's all sorts of other things that have to get pulled in there. So you're talking about, we say 30,000, but that's not the actual amount that we're going to have to be able to have a full-time, an associate pastor, a part-time pastor. I also think that a term call, just some, I don't know, kludgy, maybe it's the wrong term, but I see wanting to be able to have an associate pastor, but to have to set all these conditions just doesn't sound right. I'd prefer to have somebody who's here, who's part of the team. They're an at-will employee. They're trying to make things work, and I think that would really help pastors even more by having somebody who can work full-time.
Thank you. Okay, discussion, and I'll, question. I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
Lauren Shabo.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi, I'd like to see, I want to know the comparisons between how this person can help Pastor Chris so that she doesn't burn out, compared to what she explained she would like to see of the associate pastor. Will they be able to help her with emergency sermons?
No. Just it.
So,
They might be able to do a sermon, they won't be able to do communion, right? They could. Yeah, it depends on whether it's So there are some things the individual will be able to do, but it will not be a partner in pastoral ministry. Is that a fair kind of a summary? Okay, but they.
Weddings, funerals, baptisms.
No communion.
Okay, all right, so wait, I'm going to follow your guidelines that you gave us.
Walt Shotwell.
Well, I know Walt.
Following up on what she said, I know Pastor mentioned a need for some relief from the 24/7 with the cell phone and occasional wedding. I don't see where, is this going to help her in that respect?
Well, this won't help with that. It could help offloading other duties, and again, it does.
When the Lindas were here, we did share the phone.
Oh, okay.
I was still on call 24/7, but at least I didn't always have, I would go for a week without the phone, because we would do a round robin with the phone.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Clement-Diaz. I just know that now having our son in the age where we're talking, I feel as though not having both Linda, especially Linda Polos, is a total loss. My son, quite honestly, he feels that void. He doesn't tell me, but I know. I think your proposal is top-notch, and I think we need to do it yesterday. Because Nicholas and his friends in church, when I have come to pastors, her lessons are phenomenal, but we need that other piece because it's reaching out to our youth, and youth is the future. And I also feel too is that all the extras that they did, my son was more apt to do. I just think it's a great thing. I think we need to do it.
Thank you. Eric. And Kathy, I see Kathy. So Eric and then Kathy.
I'm hearing the same thing throughout our discussion today about needing to address our youth and our future plans. I think we're all on the same wavelength here. I also know from experience, a lot is going to depend on what person or people walk through our door for us to interview. And I'm wondering if we were to amend the motion to include an associate pastor or a director of faith formation and allow the council to decide what kind of, what person we should bring to the congregation for finance.
I see two parts of this, effect of this motion. One is to switch the direction from looking for an associate pastor to looking for a layperson. That's one of them. Personally, on that issue, I feel like I would push for looking for an associate pastor first, and along the way, if we aren't finding somebody, and we could expand our search to look for a layperson instead. But I feel personally that I see the move, the spirit, whatever, the need to look for an associate pastor first. That's my feeling on that issue. The second issue I see in this is the funding. And I am really, really, really uncomfortable about taking another $20,000 from the surplus out of this year's budget. Because as it is, when we were looking at the options, and Jan had the possibilities of how we could fund a full-time person who, the feeling that she had, it sounded like was funding a full-time associate, new, right out of seminary person versus a lay person might not really be that much difference in the amount of money it would cost. It was going to take more money from other places. It was going to take paying down the mortgage by taking some of the money out of the building fund. It was going to take expecting $8,000 more of pledges a year. And it was going to take reducing our benevolence money. So I feel like we need to talk about those things. We need to decide. And I was voting against calling the question on the budget because I feel like we need to talk about, are we going to do the benevolence this year that's in the spending plan?
Yes.
Or are we going to reduce it? I think we should talk about it, okay? And I feel like in the past, I was always like, no, that benevolence is like sacred. But honestly, if we can't shepherd be stewards of our gifts in a rational, conscious way and make choices, maybe this is a choice we're called to make. I liked Jan's view of looking at, researching how we match up and where we are on that, and I think it's something we need to talk about. So I think we need to find the funding and change maybe the way we're using our money right now before we do this. Just saying, okay, it's going to take 50, let's just spend 50. 2 years from now, where are we going to be with that? Okay, and what if a few more of the people retire and take their $10,000, $15,000 a year pledges with them? Then what do we do?
Thanks. I think Florindo's next, and then Christine.
I wholeheartedly agree with Jeff that that is what we need, but I wholeheartedly agree with Jeff that that is what we need, that is the direction we need to go in. But, and Kathy brought up something that makes sense in terms of benevolence. The problem that we have, Pastor Chris does not verbalize this out loud, but when I'm sitting in meetings with her and she's got that hollow look in her eyes because she's been working 12 hours that day and 60 hours that week, I don't remember you ever working 55 hours a week, because every time I'm here, you're here. Whatever. That's fine. I count on call. The issue is, the associate pastor relieves Pastor Chris, and it's an equal, in my opinion, it is an equal goal right now, along with youth formation, faith formation. The reason for that, if our primary pastor, our senior pastor, burns out, where are we? We have a much more difficult conversation to have, much more difficult thing to address if that happens. Ultimately, and Kathy brought this up, I used to be absolutely against touching benevolence. But then I heard the statistic. Good Shepherd is number 44 of all ELCA Lutheran congregations in the country in giving. Kathy's absolutely right. We have to decide, what do we do with our gifts? What is best? I see a two-pronged approach. Fine, you want to put a weight on it? I'll give it 80% youth, 20% relieving the pastor, whatever. It doesn't matter. in my eyes, they're both equal today. And the youth are important, because ultimately, if we don't address that, our, congregation dwindles, what's left? But it's a critical question. Ultimately, I wish we would have voted to decrease benevolence, go to a full-time associate pastor who could do both the youth as well as the co-pastoring with Pastor Chris. That's ultimately what I wanted, but
Brenda, you can actually.
We still can, that's not closed now.
what?
That's not closed now.
That motion can still be made.
Can it be made?
Yes.
Okay. Hold on.
We have a motion on the floor.
I know other people want to talk.
Christine was next.
Yeah. I didn't know that, so I'm going to reserve to talk again.
Always just another point about the possibility of changing additional staff to a lay person. So, we have had lay staff here as opposed to an associate pastor for, I don't know, what, 15, I can't even remember the number. And I think even in terms of if we are looking at this as a part-time pastor versus full-time associate, if their focus is families and youth ministry, there's something different. Not that our lay staff in the past, there was any issue with them or problem with them. They were excellent, lay staff. But there's something different that a pastor brings. There's a different relationship that you have with a pastor, with that shepherd, with that person that leads you. Even just the fact that this second pastor can go on youth retreats, or the women's retreat, or a men's retreat, which we haven't done in many years, and they can lead communion. Otherwise we'd have to pull Pastor Chris from church on Sunday to do that with us. I know one year she did kind of stay up till late Saturday night and then drive home, which is great, but should not be expected. I mean, there's something different. Even though, Linda Walker was an AIM and she's fully trained, she has an M and a master's in theology, there's still something a little different sometimes with having an extra pastor. And it's that, if when people walk in the door, they see that we have two pastors, we're growing, we're vibrant, we have all these activities, maybe more people are likely to come. Not that we're like, but that's what we want to do. We want to we want to spread the word, we want to invite people to come. And if having that second pastor is more inviting, then maybe that's something that we should do as well, for that reason as well. And I just think it would be an advantage to have, personally, an associate pastor again. It's been a long time, and when I was running youth group, pre-kids, and we went on retreat, I actually called friends of mine that were nearby and said, hey, can you run communion for us? And they did. They volunteered, they came out, they had communion with us, because I needed a pastor, because I couldn't do it myself. So that's just my 2 cents.
Bill, I think you were next.
Just one quick thing, Jeff, your 50,000 is for the whole year?
Yeah, well, for whenever they get.
It's a total spend.
Yeah, well, actually, I was looking at.
What's an annual amount?
Annual rate.
Okay, because the 30,000 only represents 9 months, is that correct?
That was the envision, what was there, which annualizes the 40,000. So next year, if we had voted that plan next year, that line would have been 40,000. But the other, wait, just 1 second. I'll get you. Just to clarify that, so the money's in the plan while we talk about starting in April or full year for Jeff. The money is there to spend, even if it was on 12/31 and we wrote a check for $50,000, it would be consistent with the plan. It would be unrealistic, but we use that date to kind of guesstimate the timings. I think Jan was next, and then I see Ron.
And then Richard.
And then Richard.
Okay, I just want to make 2 quick comments. One is about the time, because I think everybody wants this sooner rather than later. I don't think there's anybody who says, oh, let's, just take our time about this. I'm just not sure that the calling a layperson is going to take less time. Joan, how long did it take? Tell us how long it took to call the Lindas. The Lindas. That was my understanding, is that took. It did.
I called Linda Polis. It was about 6 months worth of interviews.
So I'm not sure that it would be faster, but if we go for an associate pastor, especially if we go for somebody right out of seminary, it is an identified pool, they're looking for jobs, they want it, so I'm not sure that it would be faster. in terms of the amount, I think if we look at what Linda Pullis, what the amount was in the 2013, I mean in 2013 it's there. You can annualize that, and I think that comes to more like 63 or something like that. So, I mean, what Laura's package comes to, the secretary, with salary, benefits, the whole thing for a full year is 54. So I just don't see how we could call a full-time person for less than we're paying the secretary. So just...
Maybe muddy things up more, but I wanted to ask this question. Are we really fully utilizing those who have finished our diaconia program and our prime ministers? There's some really neat, faithful people here. Are there opportunities? And that's just open question.
I just want to reiterate what Bruno said. I've been a member here for a really long time, so I've seen the pastors change. The strongest part, I think, at Good Shepherd, it was when we had the two pastors. And one pastor was there, he was the stronghold, everybody went to him, but then we had the pastor that really was involved with the youth. Okay? I don't see that happening right now. Pastor's plate is full. We need to bring this church alive again with the youth. And the only way for it to go forward is having them participate more spiritually as well as educationally, the social part of it. Now, I may be missing it because I don't have children in it, but I don't see it. And if I am missing it, I'm sorry, but I don't see it. And that's where you miss out on the growth. You know, and that's what the important part is. We've been a congregation for a long time. We can be a congregation for many more years to come. We can be stronger. And the only way that we're going to be stronger is bringing in somebody who can work with the next generation.
Yes. Yeah. Yes,
exactly. Just a couple of things. First of all, I'm thrilled that this congregation is together to make this, even have this discussion. This shows how much people really care. And we're not just debating whether or not we should hire someone, we're just debating what type of person that should be. I just want to make one comment about one of Jeff's points about the term call. Because it's an ordained minister that we're talking about, we always issue a call to a pastor. It's not for a year, typically. It's you call the pastor to the church until they leave or if something else happens. In this case, we want to be very upfront with somebody that we don't have the funding at this point to guarantee past a certain point. And so we want to be upfront. The lay profession you hire doesn't need that guarantee because they're hired at will and could be fired next week if we wanted to. Not that we would do that, but you can't do that to a pastor. But you can give them a limit and say, we got 30 months or 36 months, whatever it is, we know we can pay you for this salary, and after that, we don't know. We'll review it. There are term called pastors throughout the synod. One of them even taught the last diaconia course. And she just came up with a rule, she already did it, by the way. So I just wanted, it's not being disingenuous, it's being very upfront and transparent.
Oh my gosh, I missed my chance. I love all the discussion. The discussion that we're having is absolutely critical, and I think that we're all talking about the same thing. Yeah. And that's the main thing, is that we know that we have got to empower our youth. Our youth are the church of today, along with the future, and that we have to definitely take care of Pastor Chris, because she, and I agree with Richard too. Actually, Richard, you probably stated it probably as much as I would have. The other thing is that seminaries now are having a line going through, educational line, going through to faith formation. So it wouldn't necessarily be somebody, from a faith formation perspective, when we're talking to the seminaries about who's coming out and in what role, we may find that it is somebody that has that faith formation training, specifically faith formation training. And I think that was what I was going to bring up.
We'll move to limited debate in a minute, but Jeff was next and then I'll go back. Well, actually, you can. But cognizant of the time, we should.
But I'm also interested in all the conversations, and I'm looking at my wife and myself, and maybe I'm background is more engineering type here besides more face oriented, but we always come with facts, we cannot deny those facts. And my concern is that since I'm no longer getting younger, and my wife is going to retire in a couple more years, if we're lucky, and we talk about the young people and the youth, and I agree 100%. I have children of my own. You try to give them a good start, and they should carry on what you started out, and they continue in it. How well are these people prepared, and if you prepare those people, and I always think about it, my wife probably going to go ahead later on, dollar and cents. It always, isn't it something? It's always remember, if I had $100,000, $200,000, call the pastor, get another pastor for him, and we all set, okay? I agree that people don't say that is fine. I know my wife said, and I believe it. You have not to think about dollar and cents. You have to say, if that's a good thing for us, do it. You have to have the faith. And never mind all the money and all the things that what you do. We have a German saying, we're thinking about certain things and do it. But the good Lord, He's direct you and tells you what to do. You say, Gott lenkt and der Mensch denkt. I mean, that is just the way it is. And we have to forget all these other things, the line budget and all this is all nonsense. We can go blue in the face until we're talking dead and we don't have the answer. But I hope that the good person who's taking our use is telling people, besides faith, we also have to live and we have some food and we have to provide something for some services. And how do we address the people when they're leaving in 10 years? Are the youth people ready to go? They are ready to give some of their wealth and their share in the blessing of God and keep these programs going. That's all I have to worry about. And we can address these things and maybe put the people around and say, hey, we need money. I mean, let's be honest. We can say, well, yeah, the face helps are cool and certain things, but also we need some money to provide some service for some people. And this is all what it boils down to, I think.
Okay. Does anybody have anything to add to the debate? Because I'm cognizant of the time.
Big question. If we go to the process of calling the pastor, can we specify that he would be working or she would be working with the youth?
Yes.
Yes.
The call process will be that.
So that will be built into that.
Go ahead. And then
I would like us to prayerfully consider, very carefully, numbers-wise, it's going to take, we're short about $8,000. I'm going to, in a minute, I'm going to make that motion to reduce our benevolence and go for a full-time pastor. But we're still $8,000 short. We don't have $8,000. And I ask whoever here is able to help with that, please prayerfully consider it. And I will speak to my kids about it as well.
not to this point, so no.
I'm not allowed to make a motion yet? Oh, good, good.
So,
All right.
I move that we limit discussion following Jeff's comment.
I understand. Gotcha. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Been a lot of really good comments and discussion going on here. I thank you. A lot of good ideas. We all really do want the same thing. We want Good Shepherd to do well. We want this to be a viable place where faith is exercised. Whatever way we go, it's going to be a leap of faith in some way or other. For a part-time pastor, it's going to cost at least as much as what we get for a full-time layperson, I think. Just to answer some of the things that have been stated, I think when we've gotten associate pastors in the past, it's been during times of growth. We don't have that right now. But I want to change that around. I think the best way is to go with a full-time layperson. I think that the things that are going to attract people to come into our doors is program, is going to be our outreach to the community and the world. And to me, we got some of the biggest meetings. We got to talk about the fact that we do give all this benevolence. I think that's a fantastic thing that we do. I don't want to reduce it. I think we have ways of continuing to minister within and without by keeping that up and continuing to work in the community through the food bank and other things and working through the synod and the worldwide church. So to me, I think that going with a layperson gives us the opportunity to continue to be strong in the ways we're strong, strengthen us in areas that we need strengthening. I think it's a full-time person is going to actually alleviate more of the burden from Pastor Chris than a part-time person. I think it's going to be very difficult to come up with a part-time pastor unless they're a retired person, because what else are they going to do? Where are they going to spend all the time? There's going to be conflicts of where they spend their time between here and wherever else, because they're going to have another job to be able to live in New Jersey. New Jersey is very expensive. So anyway, I just feel that's the way we need to go.
I believe that I can limit debate from the chair.
Put the mic up, I can't hear you.
I believe I can limit debate as the chair, and I'd like to bring the debate on this to a close, so we can move forward. But first, I'd like to have a moment of prayer. As we vote on this, we're struggling. We're not struggling, but we're struggling for clarity. And let's pray for some clarity, because we have a couple of options to move forward, and we want to be guided in that. So, Lord, as we approach these questions, how to allocate the treasures you have bestowed upon us for moving forward in mission and ministry, in faith and in stewardship, we ask for your guidance. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Cindy, it's been a while, just read the motion again.
Just add all the dollar amounts that we have in here, that's all
So,
right.
hang on, why don't you speak loudly and clearly.
That the spending plan be amended by subtracting the funds allocated for additional staffing of $30,000 and adding $20,000 to hire a full-time director for faith formation for a total of $50,000. The additional $20,000 will be funded from surplus. Is that any changes?
I think by subtracting the 30,000, you're saying only bring 20,000 in.
You're taking the 30, adding 20 for a total of 50,000.
No, we don't really actually need to subtract.
Just the add.
We'll get that. Okay, so we're voting on change to the spending plan to allocate $50,000 to hire a director of faith formation.
And the additional 20 will come from
And,
surplus.
well, I'm sorry, yes, and an additional 20 will come from surplus. That, yes, thank you. Everybody's clear. We're not increasing the total, we're just,
Well, yes,
we're not increasing the total spending.
the bottom line.
Bottom line. Not
I'd like to find out if I could make a motion to amend that motion.
Yes, you can make a motion to amend that motion at this time. Stand up, we're having a motion to amend the motion before it's voted.
I'd like to amend that motion to include an and/or situation where we go for a director of faith formation or an associate pastor. There's no discussion there, no sense.
That's a new motion. It's a new motion.
You can make a motion to amend that motion, now it needs a second to amend the motion on the floor. Is there a second to amend the motion on the floor? There is a second to amend the motion on the floor. So we have a motion to amend the motion. The motion to amend the motion is seconded. The amended motion now reads,
that the spending plan be amended by subtracting funds or amended by.
don't say subtract.
That the amended motion instead of hiring a full-time director of faith formation and/or associated pastor.
And
For a total
$50,000.
over 50,000.
Okay, so now we're voting on the amended motion, and there's a question, now we have discussion. Stephanie?
So that just nullifies Jeff's whole.
Right.
The minute we do that, we're going, anything goes.
Okay, that's my opinion right now, is that now we're back to, are we gonna call him associate pastor? That doesn't, you don't want, you want an associate pastor, you vote down Jeff's original motion.
Yes.
Right, I agree.
That's the point. Yes. If you want an associate pastor, you say no to Jeff's motion, and then we vote on what the council is gonna recommend. So we've heard about 2 hours ago.
As amended by Dan's motion, we have full flexibility to call whoever we want.
Steve, Robert's Rules of Orders, we have, just because he made the amendment, we still have to vote on the amended motion. So that's not going to.
Yeah, one second.
Second, but that doesn't mean that the motion is
No,
done.
no, we have to vote on changing the motion.
Right.
Then we vote on the motion.
Right.
So it's not.
It's a very methodical process. I will summarize it again.
If we vote on it the way it is stated right now, the and/or, does that change the $30,000 that originally was in the plan for an associate to $50,000?
That is one change that actually does happen.
I have a question. Is a question on the floor?
Hang on, wait, okay, next question is from Ed, and then.
Yep.
It's really not an and/or. You can't, you're not gonna hire both a director and an associate pastor. It should be either one or the other.
Right.
Or, that's good. Yes.
I was going to say
Stand up.
I was going to say that.
Now we have a question over here. I'm sorry, name? I don't know your name.
Okay, so let's say it's or, but by putting the amount of money in, you're restricting the potential that you would pay a pastor. I mean,
How?
it's really muddy in the waters.
Okay, so now we have, getting deep here. Now we have to vote on calling the motion. That doesn't need a second.
Call the question.
Call the question. Okay, so first, we got 3 things stacked up now. We've got to push down the queue for all the IT guys. On the top of the queue, we have to call the question so we can vote on Eric's motion. So all in favor of calling the question? All right, got it, camera. This is not clear. Okay. Opposed to calling the question.
Carl, you're down to 81 people, by the way. Just,
Come on.
to let you know.
Opposed to calling the question. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Abstain calling the question. 1, 2. So, okay, so the question is called. Now we have to vote on the changed word. So read it. Now we're going to vote on the revised word. Go ahead.
The revised word, all I wrote down,
Instead of, what you wanted to do was to hire a full-time director of faith formation or a part-time associate pastor. You wanted to add the words "or" associate pastor to the amendment.
Yes, for a total of $50,000. That's part of his amendment.
That's part of the original.
Yes, so we're voting on the amendment, Eric's word, Director of Faith Formation or Associate Pastor for $50,000.
right.
Right now, we're just voting on the original.
Yes, we're voting to amend it, not to approve it.
But the 50 was in the original, it's not part of the amendment.
It's,
Can I ask for
yes.
clarification now?
Yes.
This means that there's no 3-year limit. This is like a $50,000.
That's correct.
In the amendment. In the
In the
amendment.
amendment, it's not a term call, it's not clear whether it's just, yes. So all we're doing is voting on changing the wording. We're not voting on approving the wording.
Right.
All in favor of, okay, wait, I'm going to do it backwards.
Right.
Opposed to changing the wording. Okay, okay, so the wording is not being changed. Okay, so now we're back. All of that is off the table. We're back to Jeff's original motion, which is hire a director of faith formation for $50,000. Full-time, all in, benefits,
Right there.
Everything.
Right there.
Right there.
Can we vote?
No term.
Vote.
Judy, go ahead.
Motion to vote.
Hang on, Judy wants to clarify.
If you want a pastor, you will vote this down. If you want a layperson, you will vote for this.
That's correct.
Yes.
No, all it says, the $20,000 comes from the surplus. So if you're concerned about the financial future, you may also vote this down.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Let's vote.
We're gonna vote. We played, we're looking for clarity and discernment. All in favor of moving forward with Jeff's motion to hire a director of faith formation, full-time, all in, $50,000 in the plan, funded from the surplus partly, in favor. All in favor? All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. That's 12. Okay, abstain? Abstain, what, yeah, 2. 2.
Yes or no one?
All in favor, I just want to see a show of hands to make sure.
Oh, no.
We did that.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's why you
The engineer in me says, you have to count 2 of them, you don't have to count all 3.
You're right.
I got 33.
31.
It doesn't add up, we'll have to do it all over. All right.
Okay, now the second part.
All right. Okay, so there is a motion that I brought to the table from the executive committee.
Come on.
Okay, so. Yes, that's next. We have to get, by the way, before you leave, we have to vote on changes to the Constitution, which will allow us to do some of this electronic. We must vote on that today, please.
Okay.
We must.
Can we hurry up?
I'm trying to move it along. Hang on, Florino, let me read the motion from the executive committee. The executive committee moves that the council be authorized to begin a call process for a part-time associate pastor for a term of 36 months. I don't think it needs a second. It doesn't need a second. Discussion. Lorinda.
I'd like to make an amendment to this motion. All right. Benevolence is a huge thing, and it's a divisive issue here. I get that. But keep in mind that benevolence is not just money. And Judy Pfister taught me this 6 years ago. I'm going to explain. I am going to explain. 6 years ago, it had been 2 years after I went through a big life-changing event, becoming a single dad. And Judy and I were in the sanctuary, and she had asked me to volunteer to do something. And I said, no, I don't have time. I'll just pay my guilt money, I believe is what I said. I was making a lot of money at the time, not anymore, but that's the way it goes. Making a lot of money at the time, and I said, well, and I said this, just off the top of my head, but Judy had said something, I don't remember exactly what, but it was basically, no, that's not how it goes. And 6 years ago, although I was already a Sunday school teacher, that's when something switched in my head, and I became a much bigger volunteer here. Still getting money, but I became a much bigger volunteer and devoted my time. And benevolence is more than just money. I submit, if we get an associate pastor full-time, right, and I'll make this motion, that person will make... Oh, okay. All right, right, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I get confused with this stuff. All right, so my motion is an amendment to this one where we reduce I think that's how I am allowed to do, right?
You
I
don't even have to give that specific.
don't have to get that specific? All right. My motion is that we call a full-time pastor and we figure out, because I don't know how this works, we figure out how to do that during our discussions. But my motion is we go for a full-time associate pastor.
Okay.
I don't know how to word that, so you'll have to help me out.
Okay, so now, wait, as you proposed it, I'm gonna summarize, we need a second, but I'm summarizing. What, Jen, you have to put it back up. Because the way you worded it.
Yeah, I'm willing to reword it as you see
Read it
fit.
back. So now, the motion reads that,
Amending the part-time.
wait, yeah, GSLC council be authorized to begin the call process for a full-time associate pastor for a term of 36 months.
Right.
Second.
But, well, wait, yeah,
Financing, you need to put in this motion too. It's can't spend.
right.
Dan did, but he's got to speak to finance.
Okay,
You
yeah.
have to speak to finance.
Okay, I call on whoever is smart in math and the finances to help me word this, all right? Because I don't know.
Well, I mean, I can put what we had.
Oh,
You want me to put what we did last week?
Okay, so we had a point, wait, just so everybody knows where we're at. Warindo has made a motion to amend the executive committee's motion.
Yes,
We had a point of order that said his motion was incomplete because it was not properly formed according to our guidelines.
Yes.
I don't know that it's more than guidelines.
and I'm asking for help to make it
So what he
right.
needs to specify in his motion is the funding source.
Show me the money.
Council's original motion, the funding was as in the original spending plan. $30,000, which is $30,000. So
Which,
that-
according to my analysis, pays for less than 20 hours a week, just so you know.
But it was that
For,
certainly not.
yes, for 9 months. I mean, just so that we know what we're saying. Right. You know, I mean, I think it's much more probable that it's not going to be for 9 months, that it's going to be for 6 months, but, you know, that's a different thing. So, a full-time pastor, all in, is $87,000, and if we say for half a year, that's $43,500. It would be the amount, instead of the 30, it would be $43,500. And the 3 places that we talked about in terms of the way that it would be funded, one was from using the capital fund to pay for the mortgage, that's $24,000. One was reducing mission support to 13%, that's starting this year. It did call for an increase of $8,000 per year in giving. And it did not eliminate the funding for the volunteer coordinator this year, but it did say that if we did not raise the funds for that would be something that we would have to do. But that was not an in-year plan.
2015.
That's a 2015.
So now, we've got a motion to amend the process to a full-time associate pastor for 36 months, funded by use of capital fund,
Reducing mission support.
reduce mission support to 13%,
And increase giving.
and drive for increased giving.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the motion, it's not been seconded.
Correct.
I'll second.
Dan seconds it. Now what we're going to discuss is changing the wording.
The amendment.
The amendment to change the wording. We're not voting yet on the wording. Kathy, we're discussing the new wording.
Since the original motion didn't mention numbers, I see that there's an assumption in that the council is going to have to figure it out.
No, that was in the spending plan of $30,000.
Okay, well, I mean, there's,
That was already in the spending plan.
okay, but, so we might have ended up with 20 hours of, we could.
Right.
Okay, all right. Well, there are going to be details of this whole package that's going to have to get worked out. And I'm wondering if at some point, will we need to come back and say yes to something more specific? And at that point, can we, I guess partly what I'm saying is, can we leave the doctoring of the numbers to a point when you're closer to having somebody, to even actually putting out, you know, a job description and a
So to
request?
clarify, one of the parts, if we go forward with a call process, when we engage with Cindy, we have to build the financial. Yes.
Okay.
And it will be much more refined than what we've got. But right now, we've got, what we voted on so far is the 534, whatever. We've got to work with Cindy to how to work within that total. And that doesn't mean, there's lots of ways we can do that. But yes, and when we have the final package, we have to come back and revote, and a 2/3 majority, not a simple majority, would have to approve that.
Okay, because I'm just thinking, there's like 3 different things here. We're reducing benevolence, possibly,
That's-
we're possibly moving capital funds, and then increasing giving, which we can't really do without, we can just increase our estimate, I guess.
That's what we can, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And we have done that in years
Yeah,
past.
yes, we have, the estimate is just that, and we didn't increase the estimate. There were some folks who had some other jam ones. We're still discussing the revised.
The wording itself.
wording.
wording.
One of the things is, in terms of the openness of how we do this, we will have to be clear about whether or not we're affecting mission support this year.
I think that's an important statement. I'm sorry.
I'm Julie. So to Kathy's point, we could amend the wording to say, go for a full-time associate pastor.
Right.
By reducing benevolence to a number not less than 12.5%.
13.
Whatever her number was. I suggest that would be a good wording. And then the increased giving, I think we should leave that out of the motion, because you can't predict, then you can do the estimate of increased giving with your numbers instead of making it a part of your motion that you have to get more pledges.
But she just changed the estimate.
Yeah.
So we're hoping, praying.
So I'm saying if you could do that, say, do the benevolence to a number not less than, and then that relieves that worry. Both of someone that doesn't want to give up benevolence and someone that's worried that it's too specific in the motion.
So, Nancy, we're still discussing the amendment, not voting on it.
I guess I should wait till we're voting on the amendment.
Go ahead.
I guess my concern is, this past year, salaries was between 60 and 66% of our total budget. And if we cut back to 13% for benevolence, it's going to be a lot more. Are we becoming a me-centered church? Because benevolence and outreach and mission has been always a large part of this congregation. Yes, absolutely, we need more staffing here. There's never a question about that. But to what cost to being a church? To being truthful to our faith and reaching out and mission. That's my concern.
Hi. Answer to your question, that was great. I agree, we do give a lot out to our community, we do go out to the world.
Now.
But unless our house is in order, we're not gonna be able to grow and we're not gonna be able to sustain our giving. We need to fix what we have here to grow in our church. And then, we're not saying let's reduce it for eternity. We're saying reduce it now so we can get our house in order and then go on. So we can give out to the greater good.
Go ahead. Yes.
The fear I have when we talk about reducing benevolence is the message we're giving to the people who are not in this room, okay? You know, we say we give 17% now, or whatever the percentage is, and we're gonna decrease that because now we want an associate pastor. So what is that as a congregant? What's my message? I give a certain percentage. I want a big screen TV. I can justify how I need that. So do I change my benevolence to the church? We have to consider the message when we decrease our benevolence. to the rest of the people who aren't in this room.
Thank you. We have a couple on this side. Chris, if you bring them up, and then I'll come back to the other side. Marie, and
Thank you. Excuse my voice. Also, to add to the discussion about benevolence, we are asked as individuals to step out in faith and increase our giving. And yet, what I am hearing, what I think I am hearing, as a congregation, what we're doing is looking at what other congregations are doing and saying, we don't have to do as much as we've been doing, we can do less. That, to me, is a disconnect in our theology. We decide as a congregation, and we made that decision to increase from 17.35% in 2005. In 2006, we decided to go to 17.5% because we were going to be faithful to the greater church. We were going to step out and combine our donations with those of other congregations in the city, and in turn to the national church. I am opposed to reducing our benevolence for us.
thank you. Again, we're still discussing changing the wording. Thank you.
Okay, I certainly agree there's a fine line between what I want and what I need sometimes. But when the life of the church, and I feel the life of the church is at stake of this congregation, that's not a want. To me, that's a need. If we don't find some way to fund a pastor, an associate, we're going to continue to decline, and we're not going to be able to pay 17%, 13% in benevolence anymore. We're really talking about the future and the life of the congregation.
As I'm listening to this, I just have one thought. It is not self-serving to call an associate pastor because all we've been talking about is growing and serving the community. And as someone who works with young people, we have a crisis of faith in this country. We need, right now, with the pastor who's totally stretched for time, we're not doing anybody a service, and we certainly aren't anywhere near growing.
Thank you. I want to just, I'm going to want two more comments, and then let's vote on the wording, because we really do have two more motions beyond this. We have to vote on the daycare plan, and we have to vote on the changes to the Constitution. So please bear with us. This is very important discussion, but
I have a question on the point, though. Is this the point where I'm allowed to stick up for the motion that I just presented, or not? Because
right now,
I had...
we're not even talking about your motion, we're talking about Eric's motion.
What? Eric's motion was already voted down.
Thank you. Yes, we'll let you have a motion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for
No, I was just wondering, because I'm as confused as everybody else.
Wait, last comment, Christine, and that's...
I'm not British, I don't know anything about Parliament.
Suzanne's words are what I wanted to say, but more importantly, I'm here at Good Shepherd because my church closed because they were not worried about the youth. And we need to worry about the youth.
I think I hear that at all the debate. So
I wanted to grow, because it's not. And the only way to do that is to worry about today for the future.
Great. Okay, Christine, and then... No, Christine.
Behind you. Okay, just in terms of benevolence, I think lowering our percentage of benevolence is still outreach. If it can bring in a full-time pastor, there is outreach, there's growth there, and that is still giving to the community because there's more that we can do that they can help us run to reach out into the community. So I don't think it's necessarily lowering our benevolence if more growth and benevolent opportunities and activities come out of that.
Okay, I want to limit debate on that point.
All right.
Let's vote on this. That's
All right, and
Succinct.
I will be succinct. Service is benevolence. It's not just about money. We get an associate pastor, that person, he or she, starts helping us build those types of programs that are community outreach. Yes, it is important to support building of wells in Africa, just as important as it is to support the poor and homeless in Somerset County, New Jersey, the East Coast of the United States. Second, investment in growth. It is an investment in growth by getting that associate pastor, again, for the reasons that I stated. Now, there is that $8,000 shortfall that we are going to have to, account for.
Close the door, nobody gets out.
Right. I hope we all prayerfully consider, if you think this is the right way to go, that we together will pull through and pull off that other $8,000. And I strongly suspect we are going to have people stepping up to help. Matter of fact, I guarantee there are going to be some people that are willing to step up and help. Prayerfully consider it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I call the vote.
Thank you. All right. We're going to vote, we're going to start with in favor. The motion, can we put it back up? Put it back up.
No, first we have to vote on the amendment.
So the amendment now says, council be authorized to begin the call for a full-time associate pastor for a term of 36 months, funded from
Reducing benevolence
to not
using the capital fund to pay the mortgage
using the capital fund to pay the mortgage
and increasing the estimate of giving.
and increase.
That's
Well,
not
we
his,
don't need- we don't-
that wasn't his.
No, I had asked for that addition from Jan because I didn't know how to word it.
His motion didn't get accepted, Judy, because he didn't.
I wish you had read that before we were having the discussion.
I did.
I just thought Jan was saying this is what we proposed. We realized that was the motion on the floor.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Let's make sure we move forward. What's the concern?
I thought it was just benevolence, and he was saying there was an $8,000 gap. I didn't realize it was the capital and, and everything else.
Okay, well, that's why he asked Jan to clarify. So is there a concern?
Yeah, there's big concern.
Okay, so let's get it out.
Well, you've already called the question, so there's no more discussion now.
Okay, then we can vote it down and, but can you, then maybe you can summarize your concern and then you will consider it as they go.
That could be
All right, okay. So, I'm just trying to make, this is a very, very important issue for us. I want to make sure everyone is concerned. I'm trying to follow the process, but I'm also trying to make sure everyone is heard. So, we've been called a question, we're going to vote.
Actually, we didn't vote to call the question.
We're going to vote to call the question, that's what I meant.
Okay.
I'm trying, so, because if you vote down calling the question, you don't have to second calling the question. So, all in favor of closing debate by calling the question? All right, let's count, because it's not clear. Keep your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wow, 54. That's probably more than half. Just a show of hands of opposed, just so I can get a rough. Opposed to calling the question. All right, yeah, the motion carried. Okay. Thank you. All right, so now we get to vote on the motion. Yes, as amended, yes. Are we going to amend the wording of the motion? Okay. And we're not voting on the motion yet.
Not voting on the motion, just the amendment.
We're voting on the change in the wording, which to include money. Okay, so now it says.
Full-time.
So if you vote yes for this, you're voting for a full-time associate pastor.
We're
voting on the wording.
We're being very procedural. We're just voting to change the wording, and then you get the vote on the new wording.
Carl, you're voting to vote.
Yes, that's.
No, we voted on
Yeah,
voting on the wording,
so that you vote on it. I'm going to try and be clear, we're trying to be procedural. We're just voting on the new wording of this motion. Correct.
Not whether we agree with
Not whether you agree with it, whether you agree on revising the wording. All in favor of revising the wording of the motion to read, GSLC Council be authorized to begin the call process for a full-time associate pastor for a term of 36 months, funded from reducing benevolence to not less than 13.5%, moving or allocating funds from the capital campaign to pay for the mortgage, and that's, I'm gonna stop. We're gonna, that's what the motion is. Well, what we do with the estimate on giving to make the numbers balance is really, that's what we're gonna do. Make it balance. Judy, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Can you not balance it in a motion? Or,
What, we could actually take more in surplus than what's planned.
We don't have a number. We don't know what the
That's the problem, we don't have a number, they're all in number. So,
Yeah.
yes, it's more than the 30,000. It's going to be something like a prorated portion of about 87,000. Question's been called, we're voting. We're voting on rewording the motion. All in favor of rewording the motion as stated? Count myself.
yeah, you can reword.
Four, 16. How many do we think? All right, let's do, we have to do, because we're close. We're close. So all opposed to changing the wording? One.
Ten.
Did you count Peter?
No,
I did.
no,
So
he's on your side.
What's my 19.
29.
That's it? 29 opposed? All right, so the motion to revise. Oh, abstentions, okay, but it's still counted. Abstentions? I'm not. 1, 2, 3. I see 2 on my side.
There's 2 on the side.
4. 4 abstentions.
Okay.
And it's just a simple majority, is that right?
This is all simple majority. Nothing we're doing yet requires. All right, so the motion carried. So we now have a revised motion on the floor. Do we need to discuss it any further, or can we vote on it? Judy would like discussion.
I did not give money to the capital fund to have it go and pay for anything in operating funds. We have discredited the capital fund here at Good Shepherd for the last 18 years, and probably most of the time I haven't been a member. The church is falling down around us. And what Jan said to me the other day when I brought this up is, oh, but people will always give for a hole in the roof or this, that, and the other thing. 2 weeks before Christmas, 2 of our heaters in this end of the building failed. They're held together with bubble gum and Band-Aids. They will need to be replaced. I do not want to use the capital fund that we finally have, a small capital fund. We are starting to see this place look a little bit better. We do not get the turnout for cleanup days. I have to thank everybody who showed up yesterday and worked their asses off to make this place look good. And we did not accomplish a third of what we needed to do. But that was the biggest turnout we've had in a while, and everybody worked really hard. If we don't at least maintain the building, it's going to fall down around us. This building is getting old. It needs a lot of replacements. We are bad stewards of our energy because we have windows in here that leak. That's not even in the plan. We just can't keep asking people to give for a hole in the roof. That's not even maintaining the building. There's a lot we need to do, and I just think you need to leave the capital budget alone for a change.
Kathy?
Part of my statement is a question, in that my understanding from what Jan said last week was that during the capital program, we refinanced the mortgage and we took additional principal to pay for some of the projects that we were doing. So she's nodding, so I'm taking that I got that right. So that means that some of what I put in to the capital fund didn't just go to the projects that I thought it was going to go to. It went to, it wasn't enough. We did stuff that we paid for with the mortgage. So right now, there's extra money in the capital fund. It really should go back to the mortgage as far as I'm concerned. We shouldn't have been, we were talking about paying for stuff that we were doing then. Instead, we added to our mortgage. And now we're paying for it every month in our spending plan. If we would pay that back, we'd be able to move on.
Thank you. Nancy, I think you're on next.
It's my understanding when we did the building fund that there is a list of things that need to be done. And we did the driveway, we did some of the lights, but there's still a lot more that needs to be done. And my understanding was that was what the 24,000 at this point is for. Correct me if I'm wrong, Judy. Isn't that what the fund is for? To fix what still needs to get fixed around here?
Yeah, the idea was when we created the capital, we wanted to separate capital spending for investments, long-term investments, from annual operating expense. So that was the intention. It was also an intention that it wasn't ever going to really end because the plant needs, we would need to revitalize and renew. And we just haven't come back to you to revitalize and renew the request for the capital campaign because we've been struggling with operating. But that's, I'm sorry, I was out of order.
But my understanding was that money was donated for the church building,
Yes.
not the operation.
Yes, Chris, Marissa, we got a youth. We got a youth. Give us some insight.
Right, this is more going back towards, going a little bit off track, I apologize, about hiring an associate pastor. And I speak for myself, I don't know about my brother, or any of the other youth, I think, but I'm almost 20 years old, I'm a sophomore in college, and I have not felt like any youth anything since I was in 6th grade. And that was almost, 8 years ago, where we had a solid youth program and where I actually enjoyed coming to youth group. And I feel like we need to hire someone that will help us, whether it is an associate pastor, and we need to think about Pastor Chris. And this is just from my perspective. We need to think about Pastor Chris because if Pastor Chris gets burnt out and she can't fully do everything that she needs to accomplish, we're going to be in an even worse position. We're going to then have to figure out what are we going to do about another pastor if it comes down to that. I'm not saying it will, but if it comes down to that, and then we won't have youth programs, then all these problems that are going on with the building, we're not going to have a church anymore, we're not going to have a congregation if it collapses from, I don't know how to fully get out this thought process, but
You're doing great. Keep going.
we need to think about what's more important at this time. Yes, the building is very important because we need somewhere to worship, we need somewhere to congregate, but if we don't have a pastor to lead us, what are we going to do then? The building's not going to matter at that point. Or it won't be as big of a priority if we don't have a pastor to lead us. Pastor Chris needs assistance, and I'm just saying this from my point of view because the youth also need assistance. I'm in college now. I'm not really considered a youth anymore.
Oh, yeah, you are.
Oh, I am? Okay. Well, I'm a young adult, but I'm not like all the youth that are younger than me and are still coming up. What are they going to do? They are the future of the church. So we need to think about Pastor Chris, we need to think about the youth, we need to think about the future, because if we don't have that, then everything else is not going to become a priority.
I just snuck in because to follow up with Marissa, I have 2 youngish kids, but they're getting older. And I will admit, I've thought about leaving this church and going to the United Methodist Church. And I've explored if there is any other church nearby, because I like nearby, with a good youth movement. Because I'm really sad. My kids don't do anything, really. So I'm sad. And I'm going to cry.
Ed was next and then Joe. Well, we got Stephanie from the back, and then we'll come forward.
I guess I just need clarification about the motion. If this motion carries, we're going to call it a full-time pastor.
Correct.
If this motion does not pass, we're back to the original motion that we have to vote on, or is it that first motion passed? Please explain that.
The amendment passed, so my original motion, or the exact, is no longer on the table.
Okay, but if this motion that we're discussing now fails,
Then we have to.
then what?
Then we're done. We could be done, because the spending plan has been approved.
No, what happens, can we go back to the motion of calling in a part-time pastor?
Somebody could.
So if this motion fails, we still have the opportunity to vote for a part-time associate, which we can afford.
Okay.
Is that right? So if this motion fails, I can make the motion to go back to the original.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, I think we have Jan.
That's okay.
Okay, so Jan, you saw the question. Hang on, Chris. You know what we're doing? Well, Jan is next.
Youth. Let the youth talk.
Janice.
Let the youth talk.
She was next in order. Just because you're a youth doesn't mean you get the.
I just had a clarifying question like Stephanie did, and I wish you would just put the motion back up, rephrase it. If we vote for it, it means what? If we vote against it, it means what? And then what happens?
Fine, I'll do that. I will do that.
Could she type the whole thing?
So, I'm gonna try to keep this simple. If we do add the associate pastor, if it's full-time, there's more opportunities for people in the community to want to come to church, want to be helped by the church. And then if we have more members, we'll eventually have more money for the capital fund that can be used to actually fix the
Okay, so I'm gonna limit debate. I'm gonna summarize. The motion has been amended. The motion has been amended. I'm calling the debate so we can move forward. Right now, the motion reads that GSLC Council be authorized to begin the call process for a full-time associate pastor for a term of 36 months, and we put forth funding from reducing benevolence to not less than 13.5%, and using the capital funds to pay down the mortgage so that our monthly payments are lower. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, to pay down the mortgage. What? So voting yes means that we're going to begin the call process for a full-time associate pastor. It's still a term call. It's still a term call. The amendments were how we're voting yes means that as part of negotiating and figuring out how we pay for the associate pastor, we can reduce benevolence up to 13.5%. And as part of figuring out how we fund the associate pastor, where we can use the capital fund to pay down the mortgage. It's not a requirement, but we're authorized to do so as we begin the call process. Full-time, term call, potential to reduce benevolence, potential to reallocate the capital fund to pay down the mortgage. That's what you're being asked to vote on. A vote for yes means we move forward on that plan. A vote for no says, we have a spending plan and we leave. I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to be
You're
constructive.
not making it clear. Yes, we can't go back to having part-time, which is what the council initially
Yes.
recommended, we've been
I'm
talking about
sorry.
for a month.
You're right, Stephanie. Yes, you're right. I apologize. Okay, all in favor of moving forward with the revised motion? Full-time associate pastor, term call, authorization to reduce benevolence, authorization to reallocate the capital fund to pay down the mortgage. All in favor, raise your hands. Keep them up, please. High. What? 21. 16. 21. I had 16.
16?
16. Okay. All right. Very clear intention. Opposed. Very high. Very high.
gonna have to be written.
Okay, abstain?
3, 4.
Say 4.
I mean, 3 on this side.
Oh, 3, I got 2, so that's fine. Can you write the numbers down on the board up there?
Yeas, nays, abstains.
Yeah, marker, what you do with the marker, Jim? Just what were the total counts?
It was 31, not 36.
6 said yes.
Well, you people, it was 37 coming back in the room, do you want to grab your votes?
No.
No. They left.
Abstain was
Sorry.
I thought yes was 36.
That's what it
I
said.
thought it was 37. It was 21.
It was 37.
Oh, 21 you said?
21 and
I'm sorry, I
16.
was 20. Okay, sorry, 37.
Politically incorrect.
This is 31?
Stop, we're gonna, it's close, we want to be clear.
18 and 12.
That's what I thought. Okay, we're gonna recount. Please don't change your vote, you'll drive us.
What do you want, no?
If this doesn't work, we will go to paper ballot.
There are
This
two
is-
people that came back.
You
They
can't count
can't vote. Please,
I know.
we're out of the room for the post vote. Do not vote this time. Please.
They need
Because
to
they
be
didn't
what?
debate.
They weren't here.
They were here, the debates.
It's just like convents.
All right. What's the process? If they're back in the room. Okay, just vote. We're gonna vote again. We want everybody to be included. We're not excluding anybody. We're not excluding anybody. We're gonna vote on the motion. In favor, full-time associate pastor, term call, hands up. In favor, this is in favor, in favor.
13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
I lost one. 50. Oh, that's why I lost. Well, I forgot you were on my side. I had 16 before, 16.
22.
38.
All right, that was 38 yes. 38 yes. 16 and 22. All right, now we're going to vote no. Opposed. Very high, please. One hand barrel, please.
1, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Eight.
12.
That was what we had last. Okay. Abstain. 1. You're consistent. Good job.
3.
That's 5, that's the same.
Okay. Okay, so the motion. Carry. Okay. Two things we have left to do. We have to vote on daycare, and we have to vote on the model constitution. Okay, let's do daycare. Okay, so. Okay, so what you're going to be asked to vote on, we'll have some discussion, is the council recommends, this is the motion from council, it doesn't need a second, we'll have discussion, that the proposed Good Shepherd Christian Daycare Center spending plan, this is totaling $261,116 be proposed. Doesn't need a second. It's open for discussion. Now, there were some questions. They were mostly yours. You're okay? We will deal with noting the surplus. There was a surplus. We'll take care of that. There was a question about raises not keeping pace with the minimum wage and the poverty level. The answer is we're doing our best with what we have to recognize our staff. We're doing our best with what we have. If Pat sells more, we can do more.
We're almost full.
Okay, so is there any other discussion on the spending plan? Or the daycare, proposed daycare spending plan?
And we're looking
Go back and
at
read the questions.
Go ahead, go back one for the questions, I'm sorry. Okay, so, 4% raise, I mentioned that, not keeping up, concerned that 4% raise, not keeping up with cost of living and other things. And my answer was, we're doing the best we can with what we have to remain faithful to our staff. Just conversation in the spending plan passed. For the church staff, they only got a 3% raise. Okay, we're doing the best we can with what we have. We're recognizing the faithful contribution of our staff. We're stretched. It's all about trade-offs, which is what we just went through. We have to make trade-offs. There was a question about the accounting. There was some surplus, perceived surplus. Back up. The other one was received surplus.
Daycare made a $2,000 above our 10%.
Right. So
I'm not sure why that.
that was just a question about how it was accounted for. Nobody's trying to hide the surplus. I think we had discussion earlier that as long as the surplus goes back into mission and ministry, I think the only question here, which we at council continue to debate, should that surplus all flow back to the church and be discussed in the overall church fund? That is a continuing discussion. This is a ministry of the church. Let's not get into that debate here. That is a discussion, but the surplus is not going to benefit anything other than the ministry of the church. We don't agree on that, but it's not the place to do it. It's not the place to do it. I appreciate, I don't think we should debate that. I don't really, it's not that, unless you want it. Good. Okay, the surplus is going back to fund the ministry of the church. And how is the 2000, Jill's not here, I don't really know the answer to that question. You know how
Which one?
the 2000 payment was calculated?
I think she'll answer that.
Yeah, I know, I just don't
But I don't
remember.
remember what the answer was.
Does anybody, does anybody here need the answer? The daycare actually gave us an additional $2,000 back in the church. There's a technical question about how it was calculated, and I don't know the answer, and Jill is not here.
Let's keep going forward, when's our form?
Okay. All right, so, Stephanie, is that clear? Those were the questions. And then there's Judy's question, we have to record what happened when the surplus will take care of. All right, so this is the motion, doesn't need a second. Discussion, further discussion. All right, so let's call the question. All in favor of the proposed daycare spending plan of $461,116? All right.
Why don't you do the notice?
Opposed? Is there anybody opposed? Is there anybody opposed? Are you opposed? No. Does anybody abstain? One abstention, so it was passed. Nancy.
As a daycare board member for a long time, I do want to thank Pat for all her efforts, because daycare has...
We have one more very important piece of business. We have a change to our constitution that was voted on at national. Dave's going to talk about that. Does this need a 2/3 majority? Simple majority.
Some of you might recall, a few years ago, we brought the issue about electronic voting and why we couldn't do it in this 21st century. We brought that to the national church attention, and it's not because of us. I'm sure a lot of other congregations have the same concern. That change has been adopted in the model constitution as of this September at the National Church Rights Center, which I have the privilege of representing us there. In order to make this effective, though, we have to approve amending our constitution to bring it in conformity with the model constitution for congregations. So this is a simple majority vote. If we pass that motion, what happens, our constitution automatically gets changed, we submit it to Synod for final approval, and it's good. If you turn it down, we have to do other things. Okay? Right now, it's a simple majority. Legally, I'm supposed to read the entire document. Eric?
I move that we waive the reading of the entire document.
Suzanne, all in favor of waiving the reading?
Yay.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Good job, Eric.
Can you just tell us in 10 words or less?
Yeah, I'll give you a really brief example, overview of what's going on. One is, they responded to our request to allow the use of electronic communications for meeting notification.
Email.
So we're allowed to do that. We can do emails at that
Or
kind of
text.
stuff. Yeah.
Or text.
Responded to our request to conduct council and committee meetings electronically, which might mean conference calls, it could be Skype, it could be anything that's very open-ended, it's not specific. It does not allow us to do congregational meetings that way. Okay, but-
As an example, Nancy, last year, council piloted using Google to do voting on an issue, and so that's the kind of thing that we can do at council. It was an emergency kind of thing between meetings, to put out a statement of the thing, we did Google voting. That's the kind of thing, we were a little ahead of the curve, but.
And the third item that's changed is clarification. Some terminology was changed. It doesn't really change effectively the measures. It clarified the call of pastors, etc. It really isn't any substantial changes there. That was just wordsmithing. So really the major changes is bringing us to the 21st century as far as meeting notifications like that. Chris?
So I saw a lot of deleted lines at the end having to do with the expulsion of members, congregational members, for defaming the church and other things. And it looked like it came from the United Church of Christ.
I would know
The
that.
original wording had UOC, and it was crossed out with the Evangelical Lutheran Church. I'm just wondering whether there are substantive changes in the way we fire pastors and fire members.
There's not substantial changes. There are some clarifications of issues. UCC is denominations in full communion with the Lutheran Church. They might have taken some wisdom from another body to incorporate into our wording, but I don't think we've changed substantially any ways to handle that. I think it just clarifies some of the wording. Yes, there's a lot of cross-outs, but there's a lot of add-ins too. It's got both things going on here.
Any other discussion? Any questions? Move the vote. All in favor of the changes, adopting the changes to the model of the Constitution?
Ask for opposed.
Opposed? Opposed? Only opposed.
Do we have 47?
Yes. Keep them. Present. Don't, yes.
We have 58.
Thank you. Okay. Abstain? Okay, motion carries. Wait, we're not done.
You know what? Can we find a way to make a circle and hold hands as we say the Lord's Prayer? Great group. Thank you for your conversation, your questions. My gosh, to agree to disagree with graciousness. It was a great meeting. And thank you, Carl. Great. Let us pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial, and deliver us from evil.
Thank you, Jan Schnitzline.
Yeah.